Hello, I'm Lupilo, and I'm very worried about the situation in Gaza, which seems to have no end in sight. Does the Israeli government have a post-war plan? Is a two-state solution a viable one? If so, is that still possible? The famous political science teacher and realist, John Mearsheimer, who is best known for developing the theory of offensive realism, which describes the interaction between great powers as being primarily driven by the rational desire to achieve regional hegemony in an anarchic international system, as in recent months. His realist understanding of the world criticized the war effort and believes the two-state solution would be the path forward. However, it is hopeless, because it's not within Israel's interest, especially after October 7th, and is certainly not within Hamas's interest. He explains his view on an interview with Freddie Sayers at Unheard. Being asked by the latter, "I'm really keen to hear is what the correct application of your principles of international relations would be to this situation if you accept Israel as a state, and as an actor that will act in its own self-interests. And then you also observe the situation in the countries around it, and in Gaza and the West Bank. Is it now the case that one side needs to win and the other side needs to lose? Or do you believe that a two-state solution is a realistic possibility?" Mearsheimer replies, "I don't believe a two-state solution is a realistic possibility. Certainly after what happened on October 7th, and what has subsequently happened, there's not going to be a two-state solution. What the Israelis are determined to do is create a greater Israel. And that greater Israel includes Gaza, the West Bank, and what we used to call Green Line Israel as it existed before the 1967 war. And the problem that the Israelis face is that there are approximately 7.3 million Israeli Jews in Greater Israel. And there are approximately 7.3 million Palestinians inside of Greater Israel. And that creates huge problems because they can't have a meaningful democracy when there are probably slightly more Palestinians than Israeli Jews. The Israeli government was unwilling to move towards a two-state solution, regardless of what happened on October 7th. But certainly after October 7th, that's not going to happen." When asked if he has a solution, he responded, "I have no solution. I think what you're going to end up with is more of the same, which is a greater Israel that is an apartheid state." This is indeed a very controversial subject. In interviews, Netanyahu frequently argues that giving the Palestinians a state would only enhance their capabilities to attack Israel and is thus unacceptable. Considering the persecution and genocide the Jews suffered throughout history, there results a consequent collective fear of annihilation. This fear, the geographical incentives for escalation deterrence, and the fact that what Mearsheimer calls Greater Israel, which includes Gaza and the West Bank, is roughly half populated by Palestinians, makes its theoretical integration into Israel as a liberal democracy undesirable for Israel's interests as a Jewish state. Likewise, it's not of Israel's interest to give the right to self-determination, control of airspace and sea, to Palestine, especially under the influence of Hamas, which from a realist's perspective is understandable, given their expressed commitment to eliminate the Jewish state and its people. There are accusations from both sides of attempting a genocide. Mearsheimer shyly subscribes the idea that what Israel is doing is to make Gaza impossible to live, and thus ethnically cleansing it, either by killing civilians or by forcing them to leave. This has some probability of being true, given the natural incentives mentioned above. Some argue that the war in Gaza has killed much more civilians than the war in Ukraine, about 3 times more. However, it should also be considered that Gaza has about 15,000 per square mile, while Ukraine has only 164 people per square mile. Even considering we're comparing an 8-month war to a 27-month war, the difference in people per square mile is huge. Nevertheless, both cases are tragedies with no apparent and obvious easy solution. The recent article on Reuters by Mayan Lubel gives some hints of a potential post-war plan. He writes, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant headed to Washington on Sunday to discuss the next phase of the Gaza war and escalating hostilities on the border with Lebanon, where exchanges of fire with Hezbollah have stoked fears of wider conflict. Iran-backed Hezbollah began attacking Israel shortly after Hamas-led. 7 assaults sparked the war in Gaza, and the sides have been trading blows in the months since then. Hezbollah has said it will not stop until there is a ceasefire in Gaza. We are prepared for any action that may be required in Gaza, Lebanon, and in more areas, Gallant said in a statement before setting off to Washington, where he said he would meet his counterpart Lloyd Austin and Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Earlier in June, Hezbollah targeted Israeli towns and military sites with the largest volleys of rockets and drones in the hostilities so far, after an Israeli strike killed the most senior Hezbollah commander yet. U.S. Envoy Amos Hochstein visited Israel and Lebanon last week in an attempt to cool tensions, amid an uptick in cross-border fire and an escalation in rhetoric on both sides. On Sunday, an Israeli soldier was severely wounded by a drone strike, the military said. Some Israeli officials have linked the ongoing Israeli push into Rafah, the southern area of Gaza, where it says it is targeting the last battalions of militant Islamist group Hamas, to a potential focus on Lebanon. Juliette Touma, UNRWA's director of communications, said the agency was looking into the details of the reported attack before providing more information. Gallant appeared to make the same link in his statement. The transition to Phase C in Gaza is of great importance. I will discuss this transition with U.S. officials, how it may enable additional things, and I know that we will achieve close cooperation with the U.S. on this issue as well, Gallant said. Scaling back Gaza operations would free up forces to take on Hezbollah. If Israel were to launch a ground offensive or step up its aerial bombardments. Officials have described the third and last phase of Israel's Gaza offensive as winding down fighting to smaller-scale operations while stepping up efforts to stabilize a post-Hamas rule in the enclave, much of which has been laid to waste. Gallant, a member of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party, has sparred with the premier in the past few months, calling for a clearer post-war plan for Gaza that will not leave Israel in charge. A demand echoed by the White House. Netanyahu has been walking a tightrope as he seeks to keep his government together by balancing the demands of the defense establishment, including ex-generals like Gallant, and far-right coalition partners who have resisted any post-Gaza strategy that could open the way to a future Palestinian state. The head of Israel's Parliamentary Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, Yuli Edelstein, told Army Radio on Sunday that fighting Hezbollah would be complex either way, now or later. We are not in the right position to conduct fighting on both the southern front and the northern front. We will have to deploy differently in the south in order to fight in the north, said Edelstein, also a Likud member. Edelstein criticized a video by Netanyahu released last week in which the prime minister said the Biden administration was withholding weapons and ammunition to Israel. The video led to a spat with the White House. President Joe Biden's administration paused a shipment of 2,000-pound and 500-pound bombs in May over concerns about their impact if used in densely populated areas of Gaza. Israel was still due to get billions of dollars worth of U.S. weaponry. I hope that in the discussions behind closed doors much more will be achieved than by attempts to create pressure with videos, Edelstein said, referring to Gallant's trip. Netanyahu said in a statement later on Sunday that the video was a last resort after appeals made behind closed doors did not help. Israel's ground and air campaign in Gaza was triggered when Hamas-led militants stormed into southern Israel on October 7, killing around 1,200 people and seizing more than 250 hostages, according to Israeli tallies. The offensive has killed more than 37,400 people, according to Palestinian health authorities, and left nearly the entire population of the enclave homeless and destitute.
Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your people.